Welcome to the live lounge here at Open Banking Expo Canada 2026. And I have with me two speakers fresh off the stage from their panel session, all about consumer-driven banking, scaling trust, talking about innovation. So we have on the sofa with me Jim Wadsworth, who is Chief Revenue Officer at Invela, and Adriana Vega, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Fintechs Canada. Welcome to the live lounge, both of you.
Hi there.
Yeah. Jim, I know you moderated this session, so tell us a little bit, sum it up for us. What was it about, and who else joined you on stage?
Yeah, thanks, Ellie. First thing to say, it was great fun, and I thought a great debate. Alongside Adriana, we had Abraham, as I referred to him on stage, the architect of consumer-driven banking here in Canada.
Yeah.
Heather from CIBC, and Ail Sivan, moving from his day job on the today of running the whole event, if you like, as MC, to actually being a panelist. So it was great having that perspective of bank, fintech, I guess, kind of quasi ex-regulator, ex-government person, and if you like, a service provider as well in Ail's capacity. So it's great having that group.
Yeah, great. A broad spread of the ecosystem. And Adriana, for you, what were the key takeaways?
There were a few takeaways for me, actually. And thank you so much, Jim, for moderating a great panel. I thought you really aimed to have a very lively discussion, and I think that we achieved that. It was very dynamic, a lot of back and forth. One of the biggest takeaways for me is probably just the dimension, the sheer amount of work that is still to be done in our market to get things going. I think that because we have been waiting for so long, when Budget 25 arrived, and there was this, very strong signal and a commitment to make it happen in Canada for the Canadian consumer, there's been a lot of celebration and a lot of companies already just waiting to engage and waiting to deploy their products. But now it's actually when the hard work begins, where a lot of the real architecture that is going to define which version of open banking we end up implementing in Canada, that's where it starts now, right? Like, what are going to be the rules for liability? What are going to be the rules for monitoring, and how this all interacts with the multiple other dynamics that are happening at the same time in our market? Call it stable coins, call it real-time rail. All of those things are going to have an influence in how open banking is deployed. And so on the one hand, it's a little bit daunting, but it's also very exciting.
And so is that a kind of point that all of the panelists converged around them?
I believe so. And I think that we had a good mix on the panel of folks who have been working on this file for a very long time. I myself, I feel like I'm a relatively new addition into the space. And what I can say consistently is just everybody is really driven to make this happen, because ultimately the goal is to spur that competition and greater choice for Canadians, and just have more agency over their data and their money.
And Jim, for you, why was it so important to have this conversation right here, right now, and on the stage?
It's an exciting moment here in Canada, and the event is very well timed given legislation. The consumer-driven banking part of the budget bill has just passed in the lower house to go then on to the Senate and then for royal assent. So we're, after lots of years of hard work by all sorts of people, as somebody on stage this morning categorized at the end of the beginning, and I think that's about right. And I think there is a lot of hard work still to be done to go from great. There's a legislative foundation now to actually get the whole thing live. We heard from Ron Moreau this morning talking about, the Bank of Canada's role in that. So there's regulation to come and all of those sorts of things. But I think, the panel was united around the excitement of the topic. But I think also, a rich debate, different perspectives on things like how much education do consumers really need? The reality is, through screen scraping and things like that, many Canadians are engaging these services today. I think that probably where we netted out to on the stage was consumers will engage with services that inspire them.
Yeah.
Telling them open banking is a good thing in itself isn't particularly relevant. So it comes down to the services. But the other thing we talked about, and there was a great question from the audience at the end around trust. The way I phrased it, trust is easy to lose. And what matters, therefore, is, how do you recover things if they go wrong? And I think the point from the questioner on the floor was, okay, so the Bank of Canada will accredit X number of fintechs. That's fantastic. And they will publish that data via a registry. Again, fantastic. But I think the question that came up was, what if things later on go wrong? How will the customer know that actually this fintech that was accredited, has been accredited, perhaps now is problematic. And I think, that was a good example of stuff that has to be worked through still here in Canada. And, it was a very insightful question.
Yeah, and it shows, I guess, that you're really getting into the weeds here in Canada now. It's not talking too high level anymore, right, Adriana?
Absolutely. I mean, I wanted to pick up on that point that Jim just raised. I thought that there was a very healthy debate within the panel on the role that government and industry have in educating the consumer. And I kind of takes me back a little bit to this chicken and egg situation where the question and or the statement, the way that it was framed was, we need to inform the consumer that this is happening. And an opposing view was, well, they're already using it. So how much actually do they need to be told this is happening? And I think I see this as a bit of a dance, right? Like the consumer has certain needs that are being unmet. Therefore, innovation is bridging that gap and creating a product that the consumer is benefiting from. And that explains why we already have kind of a clunky version of open banking in this market. But it's clunky. It is not the safest, and so open banking actually is going to be the solution to those issues. And my point on the panel was the information piece for the consumer comes from a safety perspective, right? Like maybe you already know you're already using the apps, you're already sharing your data, but now how do you protect yourself from this increased optionality that exists in the market? So I thought that was a very healthy discussion and a timely one as well.
Yeah. And Jim, for you, is there anything that you'll take away from this panel to reflect on, or perhaps that you hope your audience will take away?
Yeah, I think, from a narrow Invela perspective, we're all about helping open finance ecosystems to become safe and secure. And things like that downstream risk management, where we are providing services, and we're looking to do that here in Canada too in due course, providing services to help the ecosystems understand the real risks associated with different entities and how those risks change over time. Because an accreditation is naturally a point in time exercise.
Yeah.
The entity is good today doesn't mean it's good next week. And so, that's where we feel we have something to add. But I think coming up a level, it's just exciting, that Canada's got to this point. And we talked also on the panel about the intersection between open banking coming along with the real time rail at the same sort of time. And that's just really, as an innovator, which I suppose I kind of am, it's exciting to see.
Yeah. Adriana, from your point of view, obviously you're here representing fintechs. What is exciting them at the moment? I know you've talked about there's work to do, but I guess for that particular part of the ecosystem, there's lots to be excited about, isn't there?
Well, I think there's been a lot of companies that have already deployed products because they have a very innovative product to deliver to Canadians that is solving a problem. And that's what innovators do, right? They create something, they scale it up. But I do feel that in the absence of a framework, it just doesn't really provide that layer of certainty that they need to know that I'm going to be doing this operating under a certain framework where the rules of engagement are clear, where the liability framework is clear, where I know, how are complaints meant to be escalated? How do I make my consumer whole? None of that exists at the moment, right? So to your point of getting into the weeds, that's the moment that we're in right now. And that is part of the excitement for fintechs too, right? It's like we get to influence that process. We get to be a part of the conversation. We get to be, in a way, legitimized, right? Through the accreditation process. It just adds to that layer of trust with the consumer, but also amongst the participants, right? It fuels partnerships with the rest of the financial ecosystem. And so I think that part is very exciting. On the other hand, you see a lot of companies that I think have been sitting on the margins, right? International players coming into the market who maybe had a bit of a satellite office. And the moment the budget last year is released and the government makes a strong commitment with strong signals of how they're going to roll it out, I think that we in Canada started seeing that excitement from other players who've been on the sidelines suddenly come to the forefront and say, this is real. We're able now to deploy our products and really look for scalability.
Well, that's a really positive note, I think, to end on. Great to have you both, Jim and Adriana, on the sofa. Thank you for joining us in the live lounge today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.